Are you looking for a healthy appetizer or two that you can take to a family gathering or holiday party? I have the perfect solution for you here. These are my light Spanakopita appetizers. I made these using flatbreads, but I'll give you a few other options. So if you're ready to get this party started and you want to see how these are made, stick around because it's coming up next. Hello and welcome to my kitchen. My name is Roy. I am a home cook and amateur baker, and I am here on this channel sharing recipes that have helped me to lose over 125 pounds, whether those recipes are mine or someone else's. Now today is going to be, surprise, one of mine. It is a take on the Greek dish Spanakopita, which, as many of you may know, is phyllo dough and spinach and feta. Usually it's layered, sometimes it's presented as I'm doing it today in little triangles as an appetizer, but you don't have to do it that way. And I will give you another option as we move along if you don't feel like doing that, and you'll actually save some bites and points if you want to do it the other way. But we are doing Spanakopita appetizers today because we are heading into the party season, and I thought this would be a great dish to put out now so that you are ready when the parties that are inevitably coming get here. So let us quickly go over the ingredients. You'll see that I have something hiding underneath this towel here. I have a damp towel. What I have is 4 sheets of flatbread. I am using cut the carb flatbreads. You can use any flatbread you want. Typically, as I said, this is made with phyllo dough, and honestly you could use phyllo dough for this. But what you would have to do is, since phyllo is so paper thin, you would have to spray the phyllo with butter spray and then put another sheet of phyllo over it. So you'd have to have twice as much phyllo dough as I'm using flatbreads, just so that you have a double layer of phyllo. Or you could use those little phyllo shells that you find in the frozen food section. And a few of them that I've looked at, if you have 1, it would be 0 bites or points. And if you had 2, it would be 1. So that is also another option just to make your life easier. But I will also be giving you another option, as I said, as we move along. But I have 4 of the flatbreads. We are going to be cutting those up because we are going to form triangles for our Spanakopita. As I've already mentioned, we have some butter spray here. You could use cooking spray if you need to, but I like having the extra buttery flavor. Here I have 10 ounces of frozen spinach that has been thawed. We are going to wring out the rest of the moisture. I decided to do that on camera so that you could see what I'm doing, but you want as little moisture in there as possible. You could use about 10 to 12 ounces of fresh spinach also, but I would suggest chopping that up before you cook it. And also you'd have to cook it down so that most of the moisture is cooked off, because you want these not to be too soggy inside. Here I have 1/3 cup of fat-free feta cheese. Now the one that I use is a 1/4 cup for 0 bites or 0 blue points. I am on the Healthy Better Balance plan, which is equivalent to the old WW Blue plan. So those are the bites and points that I will be giving. But the one I typically use is Athenos, and that looks like this. This is a 1/4 cup for 0 bites. If you can find this one, this is a great one. I also recently found this at a local supermarket, Market Basket, for anyone in the Massachusetts area. And this one's called Cafe Olympia. I don't think it's their brand, so you may be able to find that elsewhere. So look for those very low in bites and points for the amount that you get. I have here 1 small onion that has been diced. You want a fairly small dice on it, but you don't have to get too obsessive about it. But if you are using already diced onion, I did calculate that this is about 1/2 cup. You could use more or less. it's your call. Here I have 1 egg. It does not have to be at room temperature like when we're baking, because it is going to be part of the filling and it is going to be baked afterwards, but it doesn't have to be at room temperature. Here I have 2 teaspoons of minced garlic. That's about 2 cloves if you mince it yourself, and you can do more or less depending on your taste. I have here, surprising, 1 teaspoon of olive oil. Typically I just use cooking spray, but I calculated and this doesn't really affect the bites and points. It's just 1 teaspoon. I have here 1/2 teaspoon of dried dill and 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper. So those are the ingredients. We are going to be cooking up a few things before we start preparing our flatbreads. So they are going to remain under a damp towel to make sure they don't dry out. And let me shuffle a few things around and we'll get started. Okay, so I have my pan. I have a 10-inch skillet. You don't need a big one for this amount that we're doing. If you were to double or triple the batch, obviously you'd need a bigger pan. But we have this heating up over medium heat, and we are going to first drain our spinach. So I have a clean kitchen towel here, and I did drain out most of the liquid, but there's still a lot within the spinach itself that is going to have to come out. And we're going to wrap this up. I have a big bowl so you can see how much liquid is actually going to come out of here. And we're just going to take the 2 ends. The spinach is here in the middle. You're going to take these 2 ends and twist them in opposite directions. You can see how much water is coming out of the spinach. And you don't have to get too obsessive about this either. You do want the majority of it to come out. Once it looks like this, like a big ball of grass, you know you're in the right spot. So I'm going to put that back in the bowl and let me clean this up and we'll move on. Okay, so our pan is heated up. I'm going to add the teaspoon of olive oil. If you really didn't want to use any olive oil, you could obviously use cooking spray. But as I said, this doesn't really add any bites or points, and it does add some nice flavor to this dish. And add in our onions. Now we're just going to cook these down for about 4 minutes just so they can soften a little bit. Toss them up in that olive oil, and I'll give that 4 minutes and then I'll be back. Okay, so it's been 4 minutes. The onions have softened and started to get translucent. Now we're going to add in our garlic and our dried dill. You could use fresh dill if you prefer, but you would add that in later at the end because you don't want to cook off all that flavor. But dried herbs need a little time to rehydrate and get those flavors going again. So you always want to add dried herbs at the beginning of cooking. So this just needs to sit for a minute, let all those flavors bloom, let the garlic mellow a little bit. Okay, so it's been about a minute. The dill and the garlic are becoming very fragrant. So now what I'm going to do is turn off the heat. That's all we really need to cook. Then throw in the spinach. Now, if you were cooking down fresh spinach, you would obviously not turn off the heat. You would put that in and cook that down until it became kind of like what you have here with the frozen. But this just saves you a lot of steps and aggravation. But if you want to use fresh, that's of course fine. Now I'm just going to stir this through so that the onions and garlic and dill can intersperse with the spinach. And because we wring out most of the liquid, it's not going to want to break apart as easily, but you just have to work it a little bit. That's all there is for that. Now I'm going to take the bowl that I had the spinach in. I'm just going to transfer everything in there. I could leave it in the pan and let it cool slightly here, but it will take a little longer. So I'm just going to add that in here, let this cool down, and then we'll move on. All right, so this has been cooling for about 5 minutes. What I've done throughout is just kind of stir it, let whatever's on the bottom come up to the top so that it's not retaining that heat. And it's still warm. It's not going to be cool, but you just don't want it hot so that it cooks the egg. Speaking of the egg, what we're going to do is just whisk that up a little bit just to get it started so that when we mix it in, it's going to blend in more easily than if we put the whole egg in as is. Okay, so I'm going to add that in as well as the black pepper and just stir that around. And this is part of the reason you don't want too much moisture in the spinach, because you can see it's getting moist now, but the moisture from the egg is going to actually help set everything inside our flatbread. And I'm going to add in our 1/3 cup of feta. Now, if you're not a fan of feta, you can't find it, you don't want to use it, you could use Parmesan cheese. That will obviously alter the bites and points, but that is another option for you. And if there are any big chunks of feta as I'm setting it out, I always like just pinch it in my hands to break it up a little bit more so that it's a little smaller. All right, so that's all there is to the filling. Now, you could, if you needed to, stop here and chill this in the refrigerator for up to 3 days and then prepare the rest of it from there. But I am not stopping, I am moving on, so let me grab those flatbreads and we will do just that. Okay, so I've shifted the flatbreads off of the cutting board so that I can use this to obviously cut them. I'm going to take one of our sheets and take the damp towel and cover up the rest of them, because again, you don't want them drying out. They can dry out rather quickly. So what I'm going to start doing is fold this in half along the long edge here and take my pizza cutter, you could use a knife, and I'm just going to follow where that line is if my hands decide to remain steady enough. Then we're going to cut each of these into thirds. So what I'm going to do is fold this over into thirds so that they match up, and that looks good. So I'm going to press that down, and you can use the line here of the flatbread that's folded over to cut, and then do the same over here. Okay, so there we have 6 strips. This is going to make 24 Spanakopita appetizers. So each of these 4 flatbreads is going to be cut into 6 strips so that we get 24. So let me do that and I'll be back. Okay, so I have all of my strips cut here. They're still underneath the damp towel. I do have another damp towel here because as I make each of these Spanakopita, I'm going to put them on my baking sheet and cover them with a damp towel so that they don't dry out before they go into the oven. Now, I did fail to mention, I think, that the oven is preheated to 400 degrees. And for the other appetizer that I was telling you that you could do, if you didn't want to do the triangles, what you could do is make Spanakopita stuffed mushrooms. Just take mushroom caps. You can actually chop up the stems and cook them with the onions and garlic, and then stuff the mushroom caps with them. Now, it's difficult. I did put the basic nutrition facts on the recipe if you chose to go with mushroom. But for some reason, the Healthy app does not count individual mushrooms. It only gives you measurements like cups. So I assumed maybe 3 cups worth of mushroom caps would be sufficient. Anyways, that's what I went with. But either way, the calories and macros may be slightly different, but the bites and points, you could have up to 9 of these for 0 bites if you do them as mushrooms. So if you decide you don't want to go through all of this fuss, you'd rather just do something, or you want it more vegetarian, that's fine. Just use mushroom caps in place of folding these up. You save yourself a little bit of trouble, and you would bake them maybe about 5 minutes longer in the oven, but you would check until they got brown and soft. But we are not doing mushrooms today. What I'm going to show you is I'm going to take one of my little strips here. We're going to add about a teaspoon of the filling, and we're going to add it right to the bottom here. this end closest to me. And we're going to fold it. This short edge is going to meet up with this long edge here to form our first triangle. And you can squish the filling a little bit. Going to fold that up to make another triangle, fold it over, fold it up, so then that's sealing in this end here. Fold it one more time, and then you will have this little bit left over here. What I usually do is just fold it over and put that down, or you could trim it off with the pizza cutter. Now this, you want to make sure that the top flap is down. We're going to set this down here, and I'm going to cover it with my towel. And show you one more just to make sure you've got it down. Take a teaspoon of our filling, put that in on the end, the short end towards you. Fold up our short end to meet with our long end here. Then fold that up and go over again for another triangle. Fold it up, fold it over, and then we'll cut this off and set that aside. All right, so that's all there is to it. It's not that difficult. It is a little time consuming because you do have 24 of them. So go for mushrooms if you want it a little faster. But I am going to get these done and I'll be back. Okay, this is one of those do as I say, not as I do scenarios. I forgot, before I put the spinach mixture on the flatbread, I was going to give each strip a spray of spray butter to give it a buttery flavor. I forgot to do that. So what I'm going to do is, here are all my beautiful little Spanakopita triangles. I'm just going to spray them on the top, just give them a little buttery flavor. But that is what happens in the kitchen sometimes. Now I did recently, I was experimenting with some cookies for a collab that I have coming up in December for what I'm calling a cookie swap. So I was trying to come up with a cookie that I could use. Made the batch. The third batch was kind of small, and I was wondering why. So we tasted them. They tasted okay, but there was something missing. I had forgotten to put in the sugar replacement. So yes, it happens to me. So don't feel alone if you forget something like your butter spray. Now, if you wanted to, if you say you were having a party tomorrow, you could wrap this in plastic wrap and put it in the fridge for a day, and then bake them, give them an extra 5 minutes or so of baking time. If you're prepping a little longer, or you want to just have some on hand just in case, you can freeze these as well. I would freeze them on the pan like this. Once they're frozen, put them into a baggie. You can store them for quite a while in the freezer for months, but when you bake them, you're going to want to add about 10 or 15 minutes to the baking time. But I am not waiting. I am baking them right now. Now, if you were using the mushrooms, as I said, I would probably give it an extra 5 minutes or so in the oven, but these are going in for 15 minutes, give or take. If your oven runs a little hotter, check them about 12. But I know mine is about 15 minutes is perfect. These are gonna go into the oven and I'll be back. Okay, it's been 15 minutes and they are nicely browned and ready to be eaten. Now, I did want to mention, because I'm sure I will get questions, can you air fry these? Yes, but I did air fry them the first time. And what happened was the air portion of the air frying blew them open. So if you were to air fry them, what I would do is seal them with some egg white, make sure that they're going to stay closed, let them sit for maybe 5 minutes, and then air fry them for about half the time. I think I did about 6 or 7 minutes, but just check them. But because they blew open, I'd rather just be safe about it and do them in the oven. But you can try air frying them again, just seal the edges. But there you have them, some beautiful little Spanakopita, and they are great to bring to a party if you need to go somewhere, so you know you have an appetizer that you can eat. Also, if you're having people over, it's a great appetizer or hors d'oeuvre. You could even maybe do, I did last year, I did a trio of dips, and one of them was red pepper feta dip. That would probably be great dipping these into that. But honestly, all alone, they are perfect. Now, if you have any leftovers, you can store them in a baggie, airtight baggie in the fridge for 3 to 4 days. I would probably personally push it to 5. They are beautiful, they are delicious, so I hope that you are going to give these a try. Now, as far as the nutrition facts, for one of these, 0 bites or 0 blue points. Now, you can have up to 3, and it'll only bring you to 1 bite or 1 blue point. Again, that's using the cut the carb flatbreads that I use. If you use a different flatbread, it may come out differently. If you use Parmesan, it will likely come out differently. So just make sure you put everything into the recipe builder as you are using it. But for 1, 0 bites, not bad. For 3, 1 bite, still not bad. Now, if you're following calories, each one of these is only 26 calories. So you could have 4 of these for just a little over 100 calories. And if you're following macros, the fat would be 0.5 grams. The carbs would be 3.2 grams. The fiber would be 1 gram. And the protein would be 1.5 grams as I made them here. Again, if you make them with mushrooms instead, then I will have that on the recipe, what I got, basing it off of 3 cups of mushrooms. Why they don't give me the option of choosing a number, I don't know. But anyway, that will be on the recipe. The recipe, of course, is on my blog, and I will link directly to this recipe down below. But also down there is the link to the blog itself if you're looking for any of my recipes. Also down there you will find links to my Amazon storefront, my Fetch rewards, my Built Bar rewards, my social media, both Instagram and 2 Facebook groups that I'm part of. So check out the description box for all sorts of information. And if you wouldn't mind doing the usual, like, subscribe, comment, share, and hit that notification bell for the next time I upload any sort of video, like that cookie swap that's going to be coming up in December. And then we have another collab coming up at the end of this month. I think it's the 20th for Nuttember. And that is going to be recipes that include nuts in them. Mine just squeaks in under the wire because I'm using nuts, but not a lot. But if you want to see what I'll be making, hit that notification bell so you're alerted when that pops up. All right, so I guess we are going to dig into these and try not to spoil our dinner. So until next time, bye.